every second Friday, our Food, Wine, Travel show here on Big Blend Radio features a conversation with a travel writer who is a member of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. It's an awesome network of everybody in the tourism industry, whether you are a writer, a blogger, a photographer, an author, or a destination or a tour company. So today we're excited because you could hear with that music. We're going to Mexico. We love Mexico. Nancy, we used to live in Mexico. Don't you miss it?
Yeah, really. There's times when I think, why did we leave?
But now we travel full time, so that's all good with us because we can hop over to Mexico and Canada once all the borders say we can. But today's segment is with travel writer, author, and traveling nomad, Norm-Bour, and he is joining us to talk about his travel experiences during this wonderful age of the coronavirus. And he was traveling when it hit, and he was going over to Asia, and he came back to the States, but now he's in Mexico. So really keep up with his adventures at travelyounger.com. You can also read a story about this adventure, with the beginning of the pandemic, if you go to the blog on ifwtwa.org. That's for IFTWA, the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. So, Norm, how is life in Mexico, and where are you in Mexico?
Well, good morning, ladies, or hola, senores, as we say down here, even though I'm not very proficient. Don't ask me to dive any deeper into Spanish because, at the age of 66, languages don't come as easily as it did 40 years ago. But I'm down in a little town called Puerto Morelos, which is like a little seaside village about 30 minutes south of Cancun, about 30 minutes north of Playa del Carmen, which is a very well-known resort destination. And we've been here since the third week of March. And I have to tell you that I never in my wildest dreams, even as we started our travel, I never would have thought that I would have loved and wanted to live and would be living in Mexico because it was just not on my radar screen. It was way off to the side of being one of those things that I would get to if and when the time came. But I was more interested, more focused on the other side of the pond, so to speak, over in Europe. But here I am in Mexico. We kind of got stuck. And I can think of worse places to be stuck. I'm down here close to the beach, and things are very cheap, and life is good.
Man, and you got, Cancun. We haven't been to Cancun area at all, but I think you guys get crocodiles out there, don't you?
We have crocodiles. As a matter of fact, this little town that I live in has a seaside area and then an area of the land, and in between is a large mangrove area, and they call them crocodillos. And, there's crocodiles down here. We also have iguanas, and we have monkeys, and we have a lot of tropical birds. So it's kind of cool waking up to the morning to the sound of the tropical birds.
Awesome. That sounds wonderful. Coming to see you.
So, I know. I know. Well, Mexico doesn't. And you got cervezas and tacos and all that good food. Mexican food, that's something Nancy and I, we crave on the road. It's like, okay, who's got good Mexican food? Right now, today, we're in Pennsylvania, and we haven't tried Mexican food in Pennsylvania yet, but we will, hopefully at some point.
Well, what's interesting is it's surprising how little Mexican food I have down here. The world has become so international over the years that I also enjoyed hamburgers and French fries overseas, and I enjoy hamburgers and French fries down here. But this little town that I'm living in, it's not really a tourist destination to the extent of Cancun, which of course is a major tourist destination, but you can truly find any type of food that you want, for the most part, very, very good. And we have our little roadside stands, but surprisingly, I don't partake in as much Mexican food here as I probably did when I lived in California. What's that all about? I have no idea.
That's interesting. I know right now we've been eating a lot of breakfast because we've been staying in a lot of amazing bed and breakfasts, and it's amazing the different styles of French toast and quiche and pancakes, and I'm not getting bored with it whatsoever, man. It's a way to start the day, and you get to go running out after that and go filming and have a good time. So food is good. No matter where you are, there's always some good food to be found. Is that part of why you travel, is for the food?
Well, it's funny you asked that question. The answer would probably be no. I don't consider myself a foodie, but I do appreciate good food. To me, it's not just substance. It's something that I truly enjoy. But one of the things I started doing is I started a research book called Life on the Road. And as we started our journey in February of 2019, we visited we visited 23 countries over 14 months, about 400 cities and almost 100,000 kilometers. And along the way, we met a lot of travelers, a lot of Australians, especially on the other side of the world, and a fair number of Americans. And I started asking them, why you travel, because some of these people truly don't have fixed homes and they don't really go back to their homes. So I started writing a book called Life on the Road, Why and How People Travel. And I come up with what I call 6 principles or 6 tenets. And one of them is food, because there are a large number of nomads, digital or otherwise, who that's what they love to do. They want to go to Bangkok, Thailand, and they want to participate in the street food, and they want to go to France, and they want to go to the wine region, and they want to go to Italy, and they want to enjoy the pasta, and so forth and so on. So there are a lot of nomads that do that, but to me, I mostly did it for the adventure. I mostly did it for the sense of history. Living in the United States for all of my life until I left, the history there is a drop in time. I'm originally from Pennsylvania, where you are right now, Lisa, and an old building there is from the 1700s. In California, where I lived for 40 years, an old building is probably 100 years old. But when we stayed in Italy outside of Rome, we stayed in a building that was 500 years old, and the town was actually founded 500 years before Rome. It's like, holy crap, when you put things into perspective and you realize how long people have been walking this earth and how many things have happened since then, it really kind of puts ourselves in place about our space in the context of the entire world. It's like, wow, we're just a blip on the radar screen of a radar screen.
We're babies.
We are babies.
We talk about that all the time. It's that we lived in Kenya and South Africa with a few stints in England and Mexico, but being over there, I mean, you're talking about ancient natural history too, and I think that's part of why we travel. Is you've got the Rift Valley and places where they say man started there. Everybody's having that argument, but I think there are some ancient things, and here we are finding a lot of ancient places that date back 500 years, and to us that's when you go to the ruins, like in Chaco Canyon and the Anasazi people, and so the ancestral indigenous people of America. That's where we get our thousands of years. However, how much of it are we protecting enough for us to understand that? And so that's what we do to try and. It's like all of our parks have history. It's just got to be found and documented and interpreted. And there's a lot. The National Park Service does a lot. So we're going to Gettysburg while we're here, of course. But the ancient history is still a very big mystery to us all here in this country. It's Chaco people, they don't know what these ceremonial sites were for, other than they built them for the solstice. And yet, how did they do it? It's kind of like going to Egypt and seeing, the pyramids. So we do have it, but I think it's undercovered.
Well, sometimes we need to be humbled. I mean, especially for Americans. And I'm going to make an assumption that the majority of people that listen to your show are probably Americans, and we think that the whole world revolves around America, that we are the cat's meow, so to speak. But when you get outside the other countries, you realize that people don't really care or pay attention as much to America as we think that they do, and the world does not revolve around America. Every country has its own political dissension. They have their own level of corruption. They have their own history, their own this, their own that, and everything. But we in America think that everything is us. We tend to be a little bit arrogant, and especially in this COVID environment right now. We had a situation where I watched this video of some people down at the beach giving out masks, and some of the people in California were getting irate about it. And I'm thinking that people outside the United States, they wouldn't act like that. I think that we sometimes get a little bit too caught up in our own self-importance in America, and that's one of the things that has kind of come to mind as I saw the way the rest of the world lives, and they truly, truly do live to live, not just to exist. And that's what motivated me 4 years ago, which is when the first time I actually went overseas. I mean, I was 62 when I truly started even thinking about something like this. It wasn't in my mind at all. And so when I think about what's happened in 4 years, it's like, oh my goodness, I mean, hundreds of thousands of miles in 32 countries since then. And again, had it not been for the COVID, I would be in Greece right now because that was the plan. We came back to the U.S. from Southeast Asia for a wedding, and then we had about a 2-week gap between two different things, and we came to Mexico for that 2-week gap just as Trump was closing the border, and we didn't know what that meant at the time. Does that mean that the physical border you couldn't drive across, or did it also mean the closing of international airports? So we got our behinds down here ASAP for fear that we wouldn't be able to, and since we had no home in the U.S., we thought we're going to be better off here, but we thought that we'd be here for just a little while, and then when we got here, for about 10 days, things were reasonably normal, and then things got closed down here, and other borders got closed, and it's like, we can't go anywhere. We can't go south to Central America. We could always go back to the United States because obviously as a citizen, they always let you in, but then there's a chance I might not be able to get back out. So we signed a lease for 90 days, and we said, we just need to chill. We had been on the road and moved for so many months, for 80 different Airbnbs over a period of 14 and 15 months. So we just kind of took a little chill vacation, and here we are, and we signed another long-term lease, and we're going to use this as our base until life returns to whatever normal is by its own new definition. It's never going to be like it was.
Yeah, exactly. At the beginning of COVID, when that happened, we were staying at a friend's B&B that she's selling. She's retired from doing the actual innkeeping side, and we were supposed to see her for a couple of weeks, and we were there for 3 months. And she's like, just looking at us, we're looking at her. It's like, it's a good thing we're all good friends, you know. But you know, but it did change things. We still got out and about very carefully, and we, you know, the parks closed, Joshua Tree closed on us and everything, and we went out to Amboy. We did things, but there was this paranoia and everybody going crazy in the supermarkets, and I know how people get like, oh, my home is the only clean place, and that's that. Everybody gets all weird. So what was it like being overseas? Because you were flying around in Asia. What was it like as that happened? You were writing about that in your blog on traveling through the eye of the COVID-19 storm. Again, everyone, that's on iftwa.org. But you know, there's that thing where people are wearing masks, right? And you're like, what's that for? But there's that, you know, I can imagine most people would go, oh, my God, I'm in a foreign country when this is happening. That's got to be, you know, the most fearful thing is to be away from home when drama happens.
But it wasn't, and here's why. We thought this was just a blip on, you know, just a little incident. We landed in Southeast Asia on New Year's Day. New Year's Day 2020, we landed in Singapore. We were there for 3 days, and then we went to Bangkok, Thailand. And everything was normal. It was crowded. It was busy. It was smoggy. It was this. It was that. And then suddenly we started hearing about this virus thing that was happening literally in our backyard in China. And so over the period of a couple of weeks, we started hearing this thing growing and going into other countries. And still we didn't really pay it much attention. And we were supposed to be in Southeast Asia for approximately 10 weeks or so. And we did not like Bangkok. It was just too this, it was too that, too smoggy, what have you. So we basically used that as a launching pad, as a home base. And from there we went to Cambodia, and we went to Vietnam, and we went to several other cities in Thailand. And what ended up happening was almost like an espionage story. And that's the way I define it, because we went to Vietnam and we had to go through a little bit more paperwork than we normally would have had COVID not been there. And then about a week after we leave Vietnam, they shut down the airports. They were stopping outbound flights. And then we went to Cambodia, to Angkor Wat, which is an amazing historical site, and it was dead. Normally there's thousands, if not tens of thousands of people there every day. Instead, we had the place literally to ourselves. Wow. We never had a crowd. And then just as we were leaving Cambodia, they start putting restrictions in Cambodia. And it's like, oh, my God, you know, we have to get to Singapore, and flights are suddenly being canceled. I took a picture of the departure board when we were leaving Cambodia, and out of about maybe 40 flights on there, 90% of them were canceled because things were really starting to come to a head. Meanwhile, we're getting a little bit nervous because what if we, in fact, were stuck in Southeast Asia? That was not something we wished to have happen. So we were anxious to get back to the United States only because we knew that that was at least going to be a safe harbor, and then we would have to kind of collect ourselves from there. And we had some friends back in the United States that we were going to visit and stay with, and a couple of friends said, you know, I love you. I want you to come stay with us. But you know what? You're coming from Southeast Asia. Mm-hmm. You are kind of like at ground zero. So we love you, but stay away. And And then suddenly we get to the United States, and it's like a science fiction movie with the pandemic and people, taking all the toilet paper and water out of the stores. It's like, oh my God, this is surreal.
Yeah, it's crazy, and we've had that too, where, sorry, you can't come. Actual towns closing down. We've been detoured. I mean, I can't, yeah, it's pretty.
It's like making plans don't count anymore.
No.
You try to be organized and know what you go, where you're going the next day and how long you're going to be there, and that just went right out the window.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say,
I just returned to the United States to Salt Lake for a business event, and I didn't get my ticket too far in advance for fear the event was not going to happen. So I actually got my flight within probably about a week to 10 days before we left. But truly, until the day before we left, I still had about 80% confidence that it was going to happen, because everything is so tenuous right now between flights being canceled and new alerts being put out. It's like everyone is like taking one day at a time.
Yeah, all the bed and breakfasts that we've been staying with in hotels, especially event center hotels. I mean, that's been a different thing with events. All of them are like, okay, it's empty. Then all of a sudden, in one day, everybody's coming to stay. So it's been this up and down. Everyone's, there's no planning for especially bed and breakfasts that are, working on smaller amount of rooms and less staff and everything. It's like, oh, suddenly we have a full house, and then tomorrow it'll be empty, So it's like that. It's really hard. So everybody's kind of on their toes, but I've seen mostly everyone working together, especially in the tourism industry and the hospitality industry, people really working together. And so I think, there's always a silver lining, positive things that come from disasters. And I will say COVID is pretty much a disaster, and it hurts travel and tourism and the economy. I'm hoping that the world will see travel and tourism, the tourism industry, as more important than they did before. Because sometimes they don't look at tourism as an industry.
I agree with you. And on a more spiritual note, I look at this as being a way for us to start paying attention to the rest of the world outside of our own individual world. Like, for instance, what really started, bringing things to mind is when I see pictures of Los Angeles and Southern California, where the air quality was clear and the roads were empty and people weren't able to drive, and the animals were coming out of the wilderness, and they were kind of like retaking some of the national parks, including maybe some of the ones that you visited. It's like maybe this is Mother Nature's way of kind of getting our attention, which, interestingly enough, caused me to go into a creative mode. And I actually wrote a book about that called Mother Nature Grows Up. And it talks about how, Mother Nature as an adolescent had to be taught how to, quote unquote, run the world through some very powerful relatives that she had. And maybe this whole COVID thing is a way for us to say, hey, you know what, kids? We are the parents here, and we're going to slap your hands and tell you guys to get your act together. But if you don't pay attention, you're going to have a timeout, and that timeout could be even worse than what you've been dealing with. So, hopefully this is all going to have a positive outcome sooner rather than later. But the reality of it is that we're going on 7-8 months now. We're going into the winter season in just a couple of months now. And now with kids going back to school or not going back to school, it's like, when is this all going to end? And no one really has any answers.
Mm-mm. No.
I always think of the world, Mother Nature, as like a big dog and stands up, stretches, and so some buildings over here fall down, then shakes her coat, and then a few more buildings over there fall down.
Godzilla.
Yeah.
Godzilla.
Yeah.
Here it is. But back when my Facebook accounts were disabled due to hacking everybody, so I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not in jail. But I was following your adventures in Asia, Norm, and I had the giggles with these monkeys. I was so excited about you coming on the show for this one question. I want to know about these monkeys. It's like you had flying monkeys from the Wizard of Oz on trucks. And were they baboons? Because I remember in Kenya they would just jump on your car.
Yeah,
and they
were bad.
Bite your face off. Baboons are those are some big teeth, and they will get you. And we've been chased by baboons. Cape Town, remember, Nancy? Oh my God, they'll chase you. So what was going on with the monkeys?
Well, not nearly quite Planet of the Apes, quite a violence there, but it was rather interesting because I'd never seen wild monkeys out in the wild, so to speak. And so we were in Thailand, and the first time we saw them, I'm a motorcycle rider, so we were renting a scooter and we were driving along one of the back roads, and suddenly I see some movement up ahead. We pull over to the side, and there's some monkeys coming down off of trees, and they were fairly small. They were probably no bigger than, maybe 2 feet, and it was really fascinating. So we took some pictures. So the reality of it is that we were enamored with monkeys, and when we got to Cambodia, there they were truly part of the landscape. They were everywhere. They weren't obnoxious. I'd heard stories about them going over and trying to take food out of people's hands and stuff like that, so they weren't nearly like that. They were actually very cool. But again, it's a sense of wildlife that you don't get a chance to experience unless you go to some type of tropical country. And so when we got to Mexico, it was very cool because I wasn't realizing they have monkeys here as well. And so we were in our apartment complex, and the very first day, there's a monkey sitting there. And it's like, oh, my God, but it was a totally different monkey. It was a spider monkey with a very, very long tail.
Mm-hmm.
And got to find out that there was a family of about a half a dozen that were always in our complex. And so we'd wake up in the morning, we'd hear rustling of the trees, and we'd get up from the bed, and we'd look out, and there are monkeys outside of our window. So it was very cool. It was very primitive, very Tarzan of the jungle type of thing. And, that's one of the neat things about traveling. Like iguanas I still love them because they're so unique to me still. But when you see animals all throughout the world that you don't see in the United States unless you live out in the middle of nowhere, even then you probably don't have monkeys or iguanas. But the monkeys are very, very cool. Again, not quite so aggressive as the ones that you experienced in Kenya that tried to steal your car. But that's cool.
Now, Lisa was sitting in the back seat at one time, and we were parked by a little stream, and we were eating lunch, and Lisa had her window down, and a little vervet monkey was so fast, it was like a blur. Dove in the back seat, grabbed Lisa's sandwich, and flew out the other side of the window on the other opposite side, and there went the sandwich. It was like, whoa, and he didn't hurt anything. He just took the sandwich and sat on the other side and sat there eating it, looking at us like, boy, you guys are dumb.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, where, Mommy? I want my sandwich. The animal thing, I think that's a big deal, talking about Mother Nature and such. On the tour, with us, we're doing a lot of parks and public lands, but when we started driving this spring, it was really interesting because you are kind of on your own in a lot of places, and some areas do get tourist trappy, but stay away from, that's it. When there's too many people, we just walk away. It's just, but you do kind of have more space, and I think it's great for the wildlife and great for the plants, the habitat, and I think the climate is restoring itself a bit. But we've even seen where turnouts, where you have like viewpoints and things. Normally you drive and there's, asphalt or dirt. And now when we started back on the road again, all of those were covered with grass and plants and wildflowers. Like no one has been at the viewpoint for months. Right. So it was kind of cool. And I'm like, don't drive on it. Keep off the grass, man. So it's kind of how it feels, as you drive. Yeah. So I hope people really, I think people have understood now, like, why it's important. Christina Gonzalez, who's been on the show, she's also a travel writer with IFTWA, the International Food Wine Travel Writers Association. She was tweeting at the beginning of all this that, hey, now you know why your dog wants to go for a walk so often. Being cooped up inside is not healthy for us. And so getting outside, getting some fresh air, I think people are getting to understand the importance of the outdoors and getting that is our best medicine is nature. And, so I think that's cool. But what's it like getting on a plane now, do you think? I mean, would you get on a plane now?
Well, I did. I did get on a plane now, and I'll share a very brief experience, which, again, we're talking about a lot of surreal experiences here. So when we got back to the United States from Asia, we came back for a wedding in Ohio, and then everyone was supposed to drive down to an island in North Carolina, and just like you, getting certain areas that were off limits to you, that's what happened with us too. The island in North Carolina said, no, locals only. So the wedding happened kind of on the fly in North Carolina, and then Trump closed the borders. And we had a trip to come down here about 3 weeks later, and I was fearful that we would not be able to go. So within about 24, 36 hours, I booked a flight from Columbus, Ohio, down here to Cancun. And again, not knowing whether or not the flight was going to happen, not knowing this, not knowing that, because everything was still questionable at that time. So we get to the airport about 5:30 or 6 in the morning. It's very, very dead. TSA agents are just happy to have something to do. You know, maybe the one or two gate agents are happy to have someone to talk to. And the lady at the gate says, well, you know, you're going to be one of about 17 people on the flight. And we're like, that's awesome. We've got the whole plane to ourselves. So we go over there and sit by the gate, and it's about 30 minutes before, and so happens the same gate agent comes over, and she says, well, I want to let you know that the flight is going to leave on time, and you two are the only passengers.
Wow.
Wow.
So we had our own 737 Delta airliner with us, and so my girlfriend says, can we sit anywhere? She says, yeah, first class, of course. So we sit in first class. We have our own concierge. Benjamin comes over and gives us some champagne. Would you like some breakfast this morning? He's like, oh, way. Oh, yeah. There was never a flight that I wanted to last longer. Me too. Out of God knows how many flights I've taken over these years, that's a flight I never wanted to end. So it just so happens I flew back to the United States 2 weeks ago on Delta, and I said to one of the flight attendants, I said, well, this is not nearly as pleasurable as the last flight that I took 3 months ago where I was the only one. But even so, Delta, I give them great props because they do keep the center seat empty, and the flight was not that occupied. And what was different about it, of course, is that they want you to stand apart. You have plenty of room in overhead storage. Everyone had to have their masks on the entire time, which, you know, none of us like to go through that. They passed out goodies in a sealed bag. In the bag is water and chips and this, that, and the next thing. So nothing is handled, nothing is touched. It smells very hygienic, and you know, I've never smelled cleaner bathrooms in an airplane bathroom. And so
That's
everything
positive.
is very, it's very positive. I mean, there are positives to get out of this because people always used to talk about the air quality in airplanes, the recirculated air, and if someone sneezes, everyone kind of, their heads pop up and hope they're not going to catch something. And that's even more the case now, only it's not catching a cold, it's catching something a lot more, you know, virulent than that. But, you know, flying is still very tenuous. I was trading messages with my cousin this morning from Philadelphia, where you are, and he and his girlfriend were supposed to be leaving to Turks and Caicos today, and the flight got canceled by 24 hours, and the COVID test that they had to get in order to get there was no longer valid because it was only good for 48 hours before departure, and so they had to cancel their entire trip and go somewhere else. And so no one can really plan anything. I mean, you guys are probably doing it the safest, most convenient way right now because you're in a vehicle and you can go 4 different directions, and you don't have to worry about things being closed. If there's a park that's closed, you just turn around and you go to another park, and at least that you're getting the ability to see the world, see the United States in a very, you know, somewhat calm environment without having to dealing with the crowds. And so as much as you might be, you know, envious of the world that I'm seeing, I'm envious of the world that you're seeing because you are seeing some of the small little nooks and crannies of the United States that I've never seen and a lot of other people have not seen. So I think what you're doing is just awesome. And the fact that you're reporting from the road, I think it's a beautiful thing. I'm very happy that you guys have created what you have.
Well, thank you. We're having a blast. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
We do a lot of sleeping in rest areas. You know, we're going to write I don't know, Nancy. I almost feel like we're going to start because we're documenting every single park. It used to be just national parks. Now it's state parks, community parks, all of it. And now through COVID, you know, I realized just how important that decision is. You know, because we used to just do the national parks, and now we realize every space is important. But rest areas have become our friends, and you know, some are bad and some are not, and some are really, really good. They have security. I see the rest areas are doing a really good job at keeping it clean. So my thing is, we're keeping things clean where they never were before, and I like that. I like clean restrooms, but we're seeing a lot of rest areas. We saw it in Kansas. Where were we the other day, Nancy? I can't remember. It was right outside. We were outside. We were on our way. I think we were coming
I have to look at my notes.
We were on our way to Pennsylvania from North Carolina, from Asheville, and I think we just crossed over. But the rest area had, just like in Kansas and Missouri, a native plant garden, and it's a pollinator garden. And so they're taking their space. You have gazebos and picnic areas, trash, dog walking areas, but they have these native plant gardens for pollinators for birds and butterflies. And I want to start documenting rest areas so people know what are the good ones and so that they stay open. Because when something happens financially, governments start closing those down, and they shouldn't be closed down. It's not
Agreed.
good for anybody. Otherwise, everyone's going to pee on the side of the road, and we don't want that, you know.
No.
So that's not fun. And I have done that. But
here's what's interesting is that, you know, as we go through life, we realize that there are certain things that are outside of our control, most things, especially this right here. And I'm a spiritual guy, and I believe that universal spirit is directing a lot of things. And so when we look at the circumstances that have been created on all of us, I mean, there's literally no country, no individual that has not been touched some way by this pandemic. And there's a lot of people who unfortunately have been seriously damaged, even killed through it, and businesses have been jeopardized and what have you. But there's also some good, and there's some good that we have to look at the lemonade and not just the lemons here, is that sometimes it creates opportunities. It gives us a chance to just kind of sit back and observe the way life is unfolding. And like in your particular case, you might not have ever thought about writing a book like that, but now you are. And I find what's interesting, it's like the book that I wrote about Mother Nature. I never wrote a fiction book, and this literally poured through my fingers because I had time on my hand and I was inspired by what was happening and the wondering about why this is all happening. And so sometimes you have to look at the outside circumstances and you say, all right, so how can I make the most of this? Like I've been a gym rat for 40 years and I can't go to a gym now, so I have to start working out at my home and create weights out of water bottles and different things like that. So we have to look at this situation as being one of those things that is happening to us. We did not create it. We have no fault in its creation. All we can do is react and act appropriately and try to make the best of it and be kind to other people and be, respectful and charitable when we have the ability to be that way, because there's a lot of people who have severely been damaged. And when we look at our lifestyle, we say, you know what, we are impacted a minutia compared to the way that some people have been affected by all the stuff going on. So I think we all have to be thankful, all of us that are listening to the show, in whatever way that we can, that things could always, always, always be worse, and we're having to make the best out of it.
I agree. Before you go, and this is such a good conversation, though. But before you go, I do want to touch on being a member of the International Food, Wine, Travel Writers Association. Being part of that network, it's its own community. Has that helped you as a writer connect with other writers, and has that helped you, especially during now with COVID?
Well, funny you should ask, because obviously that's how I connected with you, so that's all good.
That's right. See, that's a good thing. That's 100% right there, everybody.
That's worth the cost of admission. I got off cheap. It's funny. I've been a writer. I got into writing late in life. I didn't even start writing until I was in my young to mid 50s, and at that time I was in real estate and financial services, and I usually wrote about business-related things. And I've been an entrepreneur for 40 years, so I would write on entrepreneurial type of ventures. And when I got single in 2013, I moved to Newport Beach, California, and I started writing for the local newspaper. And now I was officially a member of the media, and I reported on travel and food and social events and different things like that. And the editor of the paper, he and I became very, very good friends. So he's the one who told me about IFWA. And so he said, this is a really good organization. It's got a good collection of people from all over the world that are involved in the writing field. And so when I started our journey in February of 2019, I knew I wanted to do a blog, and my goal was to be able to turn that blog into a book, and that's what happened. So the blog, the first 51 entries of the blog is the first issue of Traveling the World 6 Weeks at a Time, Volume 1, and I'm almost at number 100 blogs, so Volume 2 is going to be created soon. So when I joined IFWA, it was a way of really kind of finding out what other people are doing out there, like yourselves, and how are they dealing with it. And, a lot of it is in the foodie area, which is not really my thing. I'm more of the tourism type of thing. But it's given me a lot of ideas of how to look at the resources that are available through the association. And unfortunately, a lot of those relationships are primarily within the United States, so they're not really available to me because I'm outside the United States. But I think it's a really cool organization for anyone who is involved in any aspect of writing about food or travel or wine or any of those things, because, we all learn from each other. I mean, nothing is new. Everything is experienced by someone else. You just have to learn from them.
Absolutely agree. I think we all have to work together. The IFTWA has been a great organization. I think they put everyone together during the whole COVID thing, all these webinars where people are connecting with the destinations, writers, and the destinations, because destinations still have to let people know where they are in COVID, whether they're partly closed or open, or, how are they reopening. It's really important to keep that word out there, and I think now as ever, as travel writers and bloggers and, radio, all of it, we have to help them as much as possible. We all have to work together, period. That's the only way through this.
I want to piggyback on that and just mention, because you had mentioned some of the virtual webinars that have been created. I mean, when this organization creates a virtual webinar on wine tasting, and people are having to wine taste in individual locations all over the country, that shows you what you can do with technology, because granted, in an ideal world, we all would have come together and wine tasted together, but instead, they had a webinar where people were trying different wines that they would get in advance, and then they would talk about it and everything. I mean, it's like you have to make the best of what's available to you until we are able to live life, back normally again.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Norm. I know you're going to have a wonderful day at the beach in Mexico. So,
awesome.
Stick your feet in the water for us, please, because we love that. There's nothing like getting your foot in the water on the beach, enjoying that. And everyone, again, you can keep up with Norm on his website, Travel-Younger.com. Any social media spots that people should connect with you through?
Facebook page is Norm Bour, and also Travel-Younger.com, and probably Facebook is my number one blog. Every week I do a posting relating to travel, and of course my personal blog has some travel and some personal as well. But, I'm not as big into the Instagram, Twitter mode as well as a lot of other people. But the reality of it is that my goal, my agenda is I want to inspire my demographics. I'm a baby boomer. There's a lot of baby boomers out there that might be listening who say, you know what, I'm too old. I can't afford it. It's not too complicated. And if the world was back the way it used to be, none of those things are true, because it's cheaper to travel than it is to live in the United States. It's not that complicated, and I don't care how old you are, you can probably do it. So my goal is to inspire other people through my travels and prove that, yes, anyone can do it. You just have to be willing to live a little bit outside your comfort zone, think a little outside the box, and just be willing to find out what life has to experience, because, we're at the tail end. We, the baby boomers, at the tail end of our lives, and, we have a lot less time ahead of us than behind us. So it's like, go out and experience life. And you guys are doing it great. You are on the road. You are seeing the United States, the state, the national, the local parks and everything. And so if you can't travel internationally or domestically, get in your car and at least travel that way.
Yeah,
right
sure.
on. It's so true. So true. Gas is cheap now, man. Everybody do. It's good. And if you're an electric car, even better. But everybody, again, keep up with Norm at Travel-Younger.com, and also the International Food Wine Travel Writers Association. We love our Second Friday shows with them. You can keep up with them at ifwtwa.org. And, of course, keep up with us at BigBlendRadio.com. Safe travels, Norm.
Thank you, ladies. Have a good day.
You too.
You too.